And a very happy Monday to you at 12:07 in the West. It's the John Phillips Show. Mr. Randy Wang's in the state of Texas.
John, sometimes I feel this great sense of deja vu when I'm covering news stories over the weekend. Over the weekend, a South LA Autozone was looted after a street takeover. Exactly 1 year after that same South LA Autozone was looted after a street takeover.
So it's annual, like the New Year's Eve ball drop in New York City.
Maybe it'll happen again next year. Maybe they'll go out of business.
Or maybe it'll happen in 6 months. It can get worse, you know. 800-222-5222 is a telephone number, 1-800-222-5222. Hope everyone had a great weekend. The weather was wonderful. The Angels, not so much. Over the weekend, the big story, not just here in Southern California, but nationally, were the protests that were all over against President Donald Trump. They were going after him for allegedly being a king, and it was the No Kings protest. Now, if you live in a part of town where one of those protests was nearby, you probably saw what I saw because I drove by one of them on Saturday on my way to brunch. And what I saw out there were a bunch of people who looked like the parents on Family Ties. And not the parents on Family Ties in the 1980s, but how Meredith Baxter and the other one would have aged to today. And I think they're both still alive, so maybe they were there. We'll have to fact check that claim. A lot of older people, a lot of silver ponytails, a lot of posters that have very shaky handwriting on it. Everything you would expect to see. I saw a lot of walkers, a couple of canes, a couple of wheelchairs, those sorts of things. And the point of these protests was that this is democracy in action, and the public is very upset at Donald Trump, and they want you to know it. And that was the message that they were putting out there. I, however, have a different theory as to what was going on at those protests over the weekend. You look at the polling numbers right now, and you look at who's doing well and who's not. The people right now who are polling the absolute worst are Democratic elected members of Congress, specifically the ones in leadership. Chuck Schumer and Hakeem Jeffries. Chuck Schumer is the Democrat leader in the Senate. Hakeem Jeffries is the man who replaced Nancy Pelosi to be the Democrat leader in the House of Representatives. And right now, both of them, both Schumer and Jeffries, are in danger of losing their leadership posts. And in the case of Schumer, he's in danger of losing his seat altogether because Democratic voters, not Republicans. Republicans don't like them, but you would expect Republicans not to like them because they're Democratic leadership. Democratic voters don't like those two. And there's all of these rumors swirling that AOC is going to run against Chuck Schumer in a primary and would be able to beat him in the primary and become the next United States Senator from New York. And Chuck Schumer has been in Congress since Hector was a pup. And the last thing he wants to do is have his last act being losing to AOC and leaving Congress as a loser. He doesn't want to do that. He doesn't want to lose his seat. He doesn't want to lose his position in leadership. And if your own side is not happy with you, you have to do something about that because they're the ones who are going to dump you. So what they did over the weekend, to my eye, was they took all the people who didn't vote for Trump in the first place and hate him with the hot, hot hate of 1,000 suns, and they said, all right, we're going to go blow off some steam here. And I know different people blow off steam different ways. Some people go to the driving range and hit a bucket of golf balls. Some people get one of those stress balls and they squeeze it and squeeze it and squeeze it. Some people eat nothing but junk food. When you get stressed, you need to blow off some steam. That's when you go to McDonald's. That's when you hit the Chick-fil-A. That's when you wait in line an hour in line for In-N-Out Burger. But in the case of people who hate Donald Trump, you can't just say, well, let's all go to the driving range this weekend and blow off some steam so we stop hating Chuck Schumer. Because not everyone does that. You don't want them to go burn down the cities, which is what happened the week prior to that. So you say, okay, here's what we're going to do. We need to blow off steam so you have something to focus on other than hating leadership. So let's all go out to Michael's, if that's one of the ones they're not boycotting for one reason or another. Hobby Lobby, I think, is the one they don't like. Let's all go to the arts and crafts store and get some markers and get some paint and paint some posters and show up to the center of town in every town in America and march for a couple of hours, put on the SPF 50 because everyone there was translucent. Everyone wear their fishing hat so you look like Walter Matthau and Grumpy Old Men. And let's go ahead and march and get people to honk their horns for a couple of hours. And then we'll all go home. We'll all go have ice cream. We'll all go to the bars afterwards. And we'll feel like we did something for democracy. Well, no one's going to change anything. You think Trump's looking at these rallies on TV and says, you know what? I cracked down on the border because that's what the people elected me to do. But all of these guys with ponytails don't like it, so why don't we reopen it again? None of that is going to happen. No one who voted for him was out there in the streets. It was the people who voted for Kamala Harris. And they didn't have enough in the election to produce an electoral majority. In fact, they lost all 7 of the swing states. So it's not about influencing Donald Trump. It's not about getting him to change his positions on any issues. I don't even think it's about going after Republicans in Congress and trying to get them to separate themselves from Trump. I think this is Democrats talking to Democrats, telling them to calm down and to not switch horses. Because let's face it, when you look at Chuck Schumer on TV and you read all these books about Joe Biden and his cognitive decline and him being over the hill and demented and senile and all the rest, and you see Chuck Schumer waddle out there in front of the cameras with those glasses on the tip of his nose and using his flip phone, and he's reading prepared marks that he didn't write for himself, that some teenager or some recent college grad intern in his office wrote, and he doesn't even know what he's reading. You think that's a good look for him? This took him off the television and made the focus about the Democratic voters and not about the Democratic leadership. And if the focus is on the Democratic voters and not on the Democratic leadership, then some of the heat that he was feeling is going to back off. And that's what they were doing this weekend. And that was the goal that Chuck Schumer and Hakeem Jeffries had in mind. Now, I think Jeffries is not as in danger of losing his position as Schumer because he's brand new. They needed to pick someone to take over for Pelosi, and he was the guy who was sitting at the chair at the time the music stopped. So it's his turn. You're not going to change horses this fast. George Steinbrenner isn't voting in those Democratic primaries or isn't voting in that Democratic caucus, but he doesn't want the negative attention that he's receiving either. So he was perfectly happy to put the marches in the spotlight to take the heat off him too. So that's what happened at the marches. Then in Minnesota, you had 2 state legislators who were assassinated by a man who wore a mask and drove what looked like a police car to their homes and targeted 2 members of the Minnesota legislature, 2 Democrat members, one from the House and one from the Senate. And there was a manhunt that went on all weekend long looking for this guy. And they finally found him. And when they found this guy, the details as to who he was and what his motivations were are more bonkers than I've seen in a good long time. So the first thing that we learned about this guy is that he was appointed by not 1, but 2 Democratic governors in the state of Minnesota to a board, a state board where the governor gets to appoint the members. Then we find out after they start going through his car and they start looking at what names he had on certain lists, that the guy had a list of Democratic politicians in Minnesota and Democratic organizations, including pro-abortion organizations. And then the guy's brother starts talking to the news, and he says the guy is super religious. One of these guys that doesn't pay the bill on January the 1st because he thinks Jesus is coming on January the 7th. And he's convinced of it. He was one of those types. And they said he was a big supporter of Donald Trump and a very conservative-minded guy. However, when you add those two facts together, that makes no sense. Here's why. If you get appointed to a political patronage position, as they have in all 50 states, typically what happens is they vet you. They vet you. They want to make sure that you're not wanted by any police organization. They're going to make sure that you're not someone that has done something bad that's going to reflect negatively on the administration. You want to make sure that the person is not politically extreme. You want to make sure that the person is psychologically stable. It doesn't matter what job you're talking about. From the Supreme Court of the state all the way down to the Blueberry Commission. If you get appointed by Gavin Newsom, he's going to make sure that you're vetted, and he's going to make sure that you see the world the same way that he does. He's not going to appoint a right-wing Republican to any position that has any degree of power. That's not how it works. You reward your friends and you punish your enemies. And those positions are plum. People want those positions. People want to be appointed to something. People want a title. They want an office. Sometimes there's a stipend. There's money involved. Sometimes if you're appointed to, let's say, the airport commission, you have influence over what vendors get contracts, so it's worth something. Don't forget, Shang Tao in Oakland got in trouble because she was allegedly selling those positions on these various boards and commissions.
She was selling them to the Friends of the Dongs.
Absolutely,
That's right.
Absolutely.
That could be an organization. Instead of Friends of Bill, Friends of the Dongs. But politicians get in trouble for that all the time because those positions are plums. They're rewards for doing something that made the politician happy. Usually, they give them to political allies or they give them to donors. They don't just give them to random people. They don't just give them to people from the opposite political party who hate their guts. That's not how that works. And let's say Tim Walz is a buffoon and doesn't vet anyone and doesn't know who he's appointing to anything. It wasn't just him. It was the guy before him that did the same thing with the same guy. So none of this makes any sense to me. He might very well be politically extreme, and that was his motivation for these two assassinations. That may be true. If that's true, what happened? Did his brain just break? He was a normal guy when they appointed him and vetted him, and he passed all the vetting, and then he became a weirdo? Or did they just fall asleep at the switch and do no vetting at all on this guy, and they appointed a crazy person to a state commission? I don't know. I could tell you this. None of what I've seen so far makes any sense to me. And two people, or one person's dead, and two of them are in the hospital fighting for their lives. But what a horrible story. They caught this guy. Let me tell you, I don't know if Minnesota is a death penalty state, but if it is, this guy should get it. Because you cannot allow public officials to be assassinated. You can't allow juries to be intimidated. You can't allow politicians to be assassinated. You can't allow police officers to be hunted down, or border patrol people or ICE people who are staying at hotels to be harassed. You can't allow any of that stuff to happen. So whatever it is that's the harshest penalty in Minnesota, this guy should get it. But what a strange, strange story. If you'd like to email the show, you can do so at johnnydon'tlikeshow@gmail.com. That's johnnydon'tlikeshow@gmail.com. And Randy, we just made reference to former Oakland Mayor Shang Tao. If you were to go back and listen to an old episode where we talked about Shang's home being raided or Shang being charged with federal crimes, that's easy to do.
All you got to do is search for The John Phillips Show wherever you get your podcasts, whether it's the Apple Podcast app.
Absolutely.
It's Spotify.
I can get that.
It's the iHeartRadio app.
And he said absolutely. And so
anywhere you get your podcasts, you can listen to all the Shangy that you could imagine.
Prosecutors allege that Tao and her partner, Andre Jones, used her influence as mayor in a bribery scheme and with the Don.
I have a lot of weird drops on my other board here.
I was about to say, it seems like we have a larger variety today.
And he said absolutely. And so
in the meantime, what do you say we make a couple of listeners very happy?
Well, let's do that right now. 790 KABC welcomes Fits and the Tantrums with Aloe Black at the Pacific Amphitheater at the OC Fair, July 25th. It's all part of the Toyota Summer Concert Series. Tickets on sale now at packamp.com. But right now, caller number 9 at 1-888-790-5222 gets a pair of tickets to the show, and all concert tickets include admission to the OC Fair. Tickets furnished by the Pacific Amphitheater. Good luck dialing.
Let's go to Paul in San Francisco. Paul, hello.
Yes, hello. I think the biggest problem in American politics, number one, we only have two parties. Number two, we elect politicians. We don't elect statesmen. The politician has a view to stay in office. The statesman has a view of what's best for the country.
In terms of two political parties, and people hate it when I say it, but it's true, that's just the way our system is. In Europe, you can have a bunch of different political parties because they have a parliamentary system. So you don't need to get a majority to pick up seats in the parliament. You just need to get a portion of the electorate. And then you have representation, and then you build coalitions, and then you matter. In the United States, it's winner take all. So you have the Green Party or the Libertarians or the American Independents, and they go out there and they get a certain percentage, but they get nothing for it. You win and you pick up the seat, or you lose and you get nothing. And that's not good for third parties. Thank you for the call, sir. But right now it's time to open up the California Crime Blotter.
If the cashier is dummy.
Questions?
And Randy, the first story is one that you referenced at the top of the show.
An Autozone got looted after a street takeover. If that sounds familiar, it's because the exact same thing happened this week a year ago.
Happy anniversary, AutoZone.
For more, here is Fox 11 News in Los Angeles.
We do have some breaking news in South LA this morning. A crowd storms an auto parts store, taking everything it could grab as they ran out the door.
And it's not the first time. Gigi Graciette live there with the latest on this. Gigi, good morning.
They took the brake pads. They took the headlights. They took everything.
Basically everything they just destroyed on the Waymo.
Good morning. Based on video, police estimate there were over 100 suspects that broke into and looted the AutoZone here on the corner of...
Yeah, tell me again how these street takeovers are just about car enthusiasts that like to see donuts.
Oh, no, the looting is equity.
Of Century and Hoover, and someone was recording it on Citizen app. Take a look from a street takeover to...
You ever think the newsrooms all across Southern and Northern California, if it's a slow week or a one-story week and they're looking for anything, they start scrolling through Citizen, see what's going on?
Oh, yeah. Well, you know you're going to find someone getting looted.
From a street takeover to a store takeover. It happened in a matter of minutes.
Don't worry, she'll get it right the next time she does it.
And that store will get looted again, so she'll have another opportunity.
It happened in a matter of minutes at the AutoZone on the corner of Century and Hoover here in South LA. It was just after 4 a.m. when drivers took...
How late do these things go?
Imagine trying to sleep in that neighborhood.
They've got these things going on every single weekend over and over again. Imagine every single Saturday and Sunday night at 4 a.m. you hear this nonsense. That's one that I have from a street takeover in Oakland, and I love it.
Well, that's what you have now. And then when we hit July, that's when the explosions start every night.
Oh, boy.
It was just after 4 a.m. when drivers took over the intersection doing donuts, burning rubber, when suddenly dozens of them decided to take over the store, smashing the glass.
Decided to.
There's a store there. Why don't we just loot it?
Oh, the donuts just make me so hot with rage, and I see the car getting lit on fire. Now I got to break into that auto parts store.
Plus, we're already here, and I need some fuzzy dice.
Smashing the glass, and then with their bare hands ripping open the metal fence on the inside, smashing display.
It's funny to me how they have all these disposable cars that they're about to torch on fire, and they don't use any of them to crash into the AutoZone. They do it the old-fashioned way by smashing the glass.
And when did stolen cars become newspaper and charcoal?
Smashing display cases, looting, getting away with anything they could carry, although some of the stolen items were dropped as they ran. And
it's just a stampede of idiots.
With a trail of STP oil containers leading you to where they went to.
take a look at this, because it was just 1 year ago this week, June the 10th, 2024, that we were right here at the same store with the same story.
Now, I wonder if it was the same cashier, though.
I would imagine those jobs have a very high turnover rate.
You think?
Once you have been the victim of a looting, once you've been the victim of a robbery, and you're making minimum wage, slinging brake pads at the AutoZone, you find other employment.
Well, I would imagine that at 4 a.m. the AutoZone isn't open, but isn't that typically when they do their stalking?
Could be.
If the cashier is dummy.
At the same store with the same story. A street takeover turned into a store takeover.
See, she got it right the second time.
There you go.
Store takeover at the same AutoZone. As for a dollar amount, well...
You think they have like a frame picture of what it looked like when they had to clean it up last year, and then they'll put a new picture next to that one?
I think I told you about a friend of mine who works in the grocery store, or worked in the grocery store business. And the first time he worked at a grocery store, they told him, okay, it's your opportunity. You're the new kid. You have to clean the bathroom after the homeless destroy it. Because whenever a homeless person uses the bathroom, they destroy it. And by destroying it, I mean destroy it. Not quite like the kids with the TikTok videos where they actually bust up the sink and they bust up the stalls. It's not quite like that. It's mainly a biohazard from the ceiling to the floor to the doorknob and everything else. And so he had to put on a hazmat suit, and he had to go in and he had to clean it up, and it took him like an hour. And in addition to his normal salary, they gave him a gift card to Starbucks or something for doing that. And he thought, oh my God, this is one of these once in a blue moon things, and I'm the new kid, so they had me do it. And then the next day he shows up and they go, oh, the homeless destroyed the bathroom again. You're up. Batter up. And that's when he said, take this job and shove it. And he quit. If you work at the AutoZone and you've worked there a while and looters destroyed everything and it became your job to clean it up, you give them a solid. You like your owner. You like your employer. You've been there a long time. You want to keep your job. You want to make sure your store looks nice and clean and safe. So you do it. And then a year later, they ask you to do the same thing again. I think I'd be like my friend in Las Vegas, and I'd just say, I quit. Goodbye.
And of course, what is Los Angeles County doing to deter these events? Well, the police are usually outnumbered, so they can't make mass arrests like they do in smaller counties. And so what they do is, for certain streets where these things happen all the time, they put up little barriers where it makes it more difficult to do donuts, but then they just move to another street. But the thing that LA County is focusing the most on is holding seminars at high schools hosted by Barbara Ferrer.
Yeah.
Oh, can you imagine that? What are we trying to do? Increase the dropout rate?
Next slide.
She's doing PowerPoints on why street takeovers are dangerous.
I'm sure that'll change the kids.
As for a dollar amount, well, back then, police estimated about $67,000 worth of merchandise was stolen from the Autozone. But thanks to the security...
Okay, so they had that much merchandise stolen last year. Did they file a claim for it and get their insurance dropped? Do you think they still have a policy?
If they still had one, they're certainly getting dropped after this one.
But thanks to the security cameras they have inside, police were able to identify many of those suspects and arrest them. And of course, they hope to do the same this time. Reporting live in South LA, I'm Gigi Graciette. Back to you.
You would think with what happened the last time, Gigi, they'd fortify the front door or something. But I guess when you have a crowd that big, it really doesn't matter.
What is this, the big bad wolf theory?
Well, and if you come up with a super reinforced door, what they're going to do is just drive through the wall with a Kia.
I haven't seen a business that can withstand a Kia yet.
It doesn't matter. They tore. You can see that metal gate is just hanging there, just like it was a year ago. They ripped it open with their bare hands. Again, you're talking about 100 suspects or so. Yeah. So there's strength in numbers.
And then you wonder what they want from the auto store. But, okay.
They want mayhem.
Yes. And they want free stuff.
Gigi, thank you so much.
It's awful to see that. It really is.
Well, there you go. The AutoZone got looted after a street takeover in June of 2024. The AutoZone got looted after a street takeover in June of 2025. And coming soon, the AutoZone is going to get looted after a street takeover in June of 2026.
Well, if they do that, I hope they bring a cake with 2 candles on it. Let's go to John in Long Beach. John, hello.
Gentlemen, good afternoon. I was visiting some friends on Saturday morning that live about 2 or 3 blocks up off Ocean Boulevard where the protests were going on, and the people that you described at the beginning of the show were walking by. They were parking in my friend's neighborhood so they could walk down there. And you saw the woman who was probably 72, 75, wearing the size, 38 tight jeans that should have been probably 46, and the halter top that probably should have been illegal to wear, and her husband, whoever he was, with the tank top on that was probably, looked like Forrest Gump, and with his ponytail, earring, his Lucky Strike tattoo on his arm, and his baseball hat. And she was carrying about a 6-foot stuffed dolphin with a stick poked through it. I don't know what the significance of that was. And then the other lady that was about 75 riding a little kid's bicycle with training wheels on, with pink streamers coming off the handlebars, wearing her pink metal flake Dora the Explorer bike helmet and a orange security vest on. So it was quite entertaining to see all that. I mean, that was just a few.
Well,
and then later in the day, I went out to Westminster on Westminster and Knott. There's Equality in there, and they were people standing out there with big signs saying that ICE was staying there, and let's get rid of ICE out of Westminster. And there were people protesting out there down with a. So it was Saturday was a very entertaining day for me, and I didn't even have to pay any admission.
Yeah, I don't think you have to worry about this crowd lighting anything on fire. This crowd looked like the 4 p.m. dinner crowd over at Norm's, and I think they're definitely going to be home in time for Matlock.
Well, the lady in the jeans that were about 5 sizes too small, that was pretty good. I don't know how she could. No wonder her face was red. She couldn't breathe.
And what's the deal with all of these bald guys with the long gray ponytails? I saw a number of them out there. If you're a bald guy
and the earring, they all got to have the earring too.
Now, I don't want to make any assumptions, but if you're a bald guy of a certain age with a long gray ponytail, I think you have about 45 stamps from Thailand on your passport.
Oh my God! Yeah, probably so. But with the dolphin, what was the significance of a 6-foot white stuffed dolphin carrying it with a stick stuck through it, holding it up? I don't know.
Maybe she found it in her can of tuna. Thank you for the call, Sarah. Let's go to Monica in Burbank. Monica, hello.
Hi, John. Thank you for taking my call. I just wanted to comment on you saying about some of these politicians that are potentially encouraging these protests, and they're so corrupt. And I've been reading the book that you talked about on the air a few weeks ago, Fight, written by the two reporters. And the Democrats and a little bit of the Republicans, but more so the Democrats, it seems like they turn on each other when you're no longer serving their interests. So it's kind of that instability within the Democratic party kind of filters down into the civil unrest. Pelosi and Biden were kind of friends, but Pelosi, in a very sinister way, pushed Biden, out of the race, just by going on Morning Joe. Just all the citations in the book kind of pointed that out. And Obama, even though he ended up endorsing Harris, didn't support Harris or even Biden running for presidency back in 2016. It's like with friends like these in political circles, who needs enemies? And also Biden, kind of he kind of just he put a pillow onto Harris's voice, because Harris couldn't differentiate herself from Biden because it would potentially damage his legacy, and his legacy was more important to him than the success of the party. But he was just so pressured. So you see all this craziness in the Democratic Party, and they talk about that the Republicans incite violent rhetoric, but yet it was President Trump who nearly got assassinated twice. And then this past weekend, like you're talking about, two Democrat state officials got assassinated. So it's like, where is the real corruption? It's probably more with the Democrats.
Well, what you just described is true, and it's a reversal of where things have historically been. Typically, what happens in recent history is that Republicans don't like their electeds. There are a lot of Republican voters that never really liked John McCain, that never really liked Mitt Romney, that never really liked Mitch McConnell or John Boehner. They didn't trust him. They didn't think that they were really down with the movement in terms of ideology. They thought that they were operators and they were there to serve themselves or their corporate interests or fill in the blank. The Democrats historically really, really, really like their own people. Nancy Pelosi among Democrats is very popular. Harry Reid was very popular. Barack Obama was very popular. And now the opposite is true. Republican voters love Trump. They're not turning on him. They're not throwing him under the bus. They're not sending him to the glue factory like the Democrats did with Joe Biden. And the Democratic voters were the ones that said it's time to move on from Joe Biden. They were the ones that didn't like Kamala Harris. And now it's Chuck Schumer who's in the hot seat, and he might lose his leadership position or his seat in Congress if they decide to throw him under the bus. But my guess is he's the next one that's going to walk the plank. Thank you for the call.